I love to travel, so I travel a lot. I travel a lot for fun and for free. I travel a lot for my work. My husband and I do international traveling a lot. He likes to geocache, so I come along with him and do that. And we've geocached all over the world, and just like so many things that I get to do today
So cool.
as a result of being sober. Like I could
Yeah.
never do these things if I was not sober.
Hey, sober people and sober adjacent people. Welcome to I Have 12 Questions. I'm Amanda Patton, your host, the leading expert on nothing. However, I am in recovery and I love it so much so that I launched this podcast where we get to talk to people who are trudging the road to happy freaking destiny across all the different ways that people get there. So while this is definitely through the lens of recovery and sobriety, the stories and the themes that we'll be covering are universally human. So love, loss, grief, excitement, parenting, outside issues, purpose, God stuff, whatever. In the words of the great Ted Lasso by way of Walt Whitman, I want to be curious, not judgmental. So like I said, we'll be talking to people in recovery. We're going to be talking to experts and practitioners who help those people along their path in recovery. And we're just really excited to hear people tell their stories and to be inspired by them and to create a community of support for everybody in recovery and people who know and love people who struggle with addiction issues and whatnot. So anyways, we're so glad you're here and thanks for listening. Hey listeners, just a quick disclaimer before we get into the interview. These episodes may contain adult language and subject matter that's not appropriate for all audiences. Also, we are not doctors or psychiatrists, so what we share on these episodes is certainly not to be considered medical or psychological advice, just our own personal experiences, which we hope will be helpful to others on a similar quest. So that's it, and thanks for listening. Hey, sober family and our entire listening community. Thanks as always for being here to share and to receive our recovery stories. It really means a lot. And our next guest that we have today was referred to me by our last guest, actually, Julie out of Denver. And she's like, you've got to meet this friend of mine. She's an interventionist. She's amazing. And so here we are. So we actually don't know each other in real life, which I think always opens the conversation to be a little more interesting anyways, because we can kind of learn things from a different flavor. Like I said, she's an interventionist, which alone is wild for me to think about because you see it on TV, but I've never, met a real interventionist that I know of. You can find her online at adrunkwhisperer.com to learn more about her personally, as well as the services she offers. And you also have a great video out there about the process on your website of kind of, how everything works, how loved ones engage someone like you to come and help someone who may be in trouble with addiction. And then I also heard your own personal story, that you've got your story of recovery up there as well with your speaker tape. So that was cool. So you've got a ton of successes and credentials. You've been in recovery for over 25 years and you've been in private practice since 2015. I'll put all of her credentials up on in the show notes whenever we post this episode. But you're certified in all of the things and all of the letters that I've never heard of, but it looks very impressive. So thank you for being of service in so many ways to our sober communities and all of us, and those adjacent to it. I just want to welcome you to the show, first of all, Amy, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited about this.
Yeah. I was like, interventionist, oh my God, can you go to school for that? Why I want to do it. Like, how do you, and then I looked and you're like, you've been studying and getting coaching and training and certifications out the wazoo. And, I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible. And Keith Bradley's intervention workshops and the Love First model and spiritual perspective. So this led me down a lot of different rabbit holes where I got to learn a lot of cool new stuff of this whole community that I didn't really know existed. I mean, you know about it, but I haven't been a part of it. So first things first, we always start with an icebreaker. If your life had a theme song, what would it be and why?
This definitely was the hardest thing for me. When I said it out loud to my husband last night, he said, "I think it should be I will survive," which I think is great. But I
Yep.
think for me, Not Broken Anymore by Blue October is probably one of the songs that like really resonates with me. And I know that although he's talking about a woman, I'm talking about like my sobriety, my program, my life, not feeling
Yeah.
broken anymore, not having that like big black hole inside of me. And then another song I've been obsessed with is Damaged by Clover the Girl. And it's talking about like I'm not damaged, that if I can love me, then I can love other people.
Right. Wow. That's heavy. It's heavy. It's important, and I think music helps so many of us heal and connect and understand. And a lot of us, I'll just speak for myself. I have a lot of issues feeling my feelings. I always have since I was a kid. That was a huge part of my thing. And music, for some reason, it just opens that little door that I feel comfortable feeling feelings when music is playing, and then otherwise I'm like, nope. But back in the day in Austin, I met Justin at a Blue October show before they were big, and I was loaded out of my mind on all kinds of stuff, and so was he and everybody else at that place. And I remember identifying with all of their music on a very dark level, and I liked it a lot. Probably not for the best reasons. Because it spoke to all my demons, and I was like, see, I am normal, and these are my people, and I like to be fucked up, and this is my deal, and this is my story. And now when I hear his music, because he's had his own journey as well that he talks about openly, I identify it in I have a totally different relationship to it. But it still hits me, in the heart. So thank you for sharing that. And then Clover the Girl, I'm not familiar, so I need to go look at that.
Yeah.
Um, it sounds like it. Um, so can you kind of we always start with this so that we can qualify and just understand where people are coming from. And not everyone on the show is in recovery or has dealt with addiction. A lot of them are loved ones or different practitioners or all of the above. So what was your experience like when you were in active addiction?
Well, I grew up in an alcoholic home, so I always said that I would never become an alcoholic or an addict. And at 18, after a tumultuous divorce, I started drinking. And the first night that I drank myself into a blackout and said I would never do that again because, I didn't know where my daughter was that night. And I woke up in a bathtub covered in my own vomit with my boyfriend laying on the floor next to me saying that he would leave me if I ever drank again. And I was
Mm.
like, why? What did I do? And he said, you sent me back to the liquor store for more. And when I came back, you were in the shower with some other dude. And that was kind of like the progression. It was men were like a bottle with a zipper for me, but I started doing every single thing that I said I wouldn't do. And I started using harder drugs. I started using crack. I started putting needles in my arms. I started making meth. Like anything and everything I could get my hands on. I would take a handful of pills from random people. I didn't even know what it was or what it would do. And, everything that I said I wouldn't do, I compromised myself. I lowered my morals and values to meet whatever I was doing around me instead of changing my behavior. And yeah, it was super crazy. I was carrying guns, I was stealing cars, just, beating up cops in the middle of I-25 and, in my wedding dress and my Doc Martens. So yeah, I
That's
was absolutely insane.
it's like a movie. Um, that's wild. Uh, it's a cool visual though, and this is how I know that I'm still an addict or whatever, because I find some of that kind of cool sounding. Like, to me, beating up cops in your wedding dress and your Doc Martens and stealing cars with a gun in your purse. Like, to me, I'm like, how badass? That's fucking awesome. But like, that's that's that part of me that still chases that chaos. And deep down inside, I don't know why, because it's so miserable when you're in it. It's so miserable, but there's something about it. Even, I mean, I'm only 11 years into my recovery, but every now and then I miss it. I think about how calm and wonderful my life is now, and I'm so grateful for it. But every now and then, and I know better than to drink or use, but men could still be a fun little diversion, like you were saying. Like there's just so many other ways for me to go find some chaos, find some self destruction, and I guess recovery has taught me to have that buffer between the thought and the action, and or play the tape all the way through, or all the things that we use to kind of snap ourselves out of that moment. But I still root for the bad guys in movies. Like I've always been that guy, that person
Yeah.
of like, I'm never like, I hope the cops catch him. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God, you can do it. Get away. You're doing
Yeah.
great. And I don't know what that's about, but your story just has so much more weight to it, though, because you've been through it. And as someone whose people, my family, my everybody was worried about me, people kept wagging their finger at me. Doctors, judges, attorneys, like counselors, all the people, and none of them were experiencing what I was experiencing. And so I just doubled down because I didn't feel understood. I didn't understand why I was doing what I was doing myself. But when people who had been through it started saying stuff to me, I was like, oh, that actually makes sense. I can hear that. So, okay, so how did you get dubbed the drunk whisperer? Like, what is that? Where does that even come from? Because that is awesome.
So I first started out being an interventionist in 2012. And I did an internship with another interventionist. And we went out to a hotel on the north end of Colorado where this woman's whole family flew in from all different areas of the United States. And we met in a hotel room and surprised her. We got her to the hotel room, and she was a nurse stealing all kinds of medications and stuff from her patients, and had an eating disorder. Like, this gal was really, really sick, a lot of different addictions, and came into the hotel room. Not too long after that, her drug dealer boyfriend came into the room too with a gun and said, "No, this isn't happening today." And she went to leave, and I said, "I'm going with you." And the boyfriend's like, "No, you're not." And she said, "Yes, she is." So I went with her. We left.
With him, like the three of you.
Yep.
Yeah.
We left the three of us together. And she said that she wanted to go to a meeting where her old sponsor used to be. So we did. We went to that meeting. And I don't even know where he went, but he left and did something. And the sponsor and I started talking to her about treatment. And I told her, "You're going to die if you don't go to treatment." And so she said, "Fine, I'll go." And we went back to the hotel room where the family had been waiting. They didn't have an update from me. And we walked in, and she said, "Okay, I'll go to treatment." And her brother, who was a doctor, said, "Oh my God, you're the drunk whisperer." And I was like, "That's a great," like, in my head, I'm like, "That's a great name for a business." And not that I had even thought about starting my own business or anything at that time, but
Yeah.
I was
That's
telling
crazy.
yeah, I was telling a man that I did an amends with, in all of my craziness, this guy that I was living with. The DEA came in and raided his apartment, cut up all of his couches. And I always knew that I owed this guy an amends, but I was like, I could not remember his last name to save my life. And I was sponsoring this gal, and she gave birth to this little guy. And I went up to see him in the hospital, and I saw the little nameplate on the baby bed, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's that guy's last name." So I went home. I messaged this guy on Facebook, and I said, "I don't know if you remember me, but I lived with you back in 1995." And he almost immediately responded and said, "How could I forget? I thought you were dead." And I set up a meeting with him to make an amends. And I was telling him that story. And like within a few months, I was celebrating my 17 years sober. And he showed up with balloons and lottery tickets and flowers and a website, A Drunk Whisperer, for 5 years, which is the
Wow.
reason, that I started my business because of an amends.
That's incredible. What and the universe is so freaking tricky and funny like that. Like, what are the odds? Some little baby's born and you're like, oh my God, that's the last name, and then full circle. I mean, but
Yeah.
I think also too a drunk whisperer, like, you know, you have to be. I mean, no offense, I say this affectionately because I myself am still referred to as unhinged, but you have to be a little unhinged to say, no, I'm going with you guys. This drug dealer with a gun and this chick who's like, hell no, I'm not going to treatment. And you're like, no, but I'm going. Cause most people would have, just said, okay, well, you're going to die and I tried and I got to go, but you're like, no. And so, to me that speaks to, would you have done that had you not been through your own journey with addiction? Probably not,
No way.
because people who haven't been in it don't understand it, and they look at people like us when we are in it like we're just crazy and we're unsalvageable and whatever. And to this day, when a new woman walks in and is such a freaking mess, and people outside the rooms would look at her and be like, why bother? But you can see it, like, that it's there. Somebody just needs to be brave enough to like sit with them and go through all that shit together. Um, and not all of us make it, like, obviously, but that's incredible. That's a great story. So you mentioned in your speaker tape about your mom being kind of like a, religious fanatic, and that you weren't a huge fan of her, from a very early age. Like when you were like 7, I think you were already like, I'm done with that. And then your dad passed away of cirrhosis when you were 14, I think, or a young teenager. And then you had your first kid very young. And that's a lot of chaos for a little human being. Um, how do you think the chaos in your home shaped, who you are, who you became, your experiences? Like, was it normalized from an early age? And that can have to do with alcoholism or not, right? Just the behaviors in general. Because even religious fanaticism, I had that in my house too. I had my child when I was 17. And so we have some similarities in that way. And I'm just wondering how you think that shaped your life and your choices.
Well, I think growing up, with it was a war zone, really. And I think growing up in that war zone taught me to be the person that I am today. I'm a good regulator for other people. Just like you were saying, like, because I grew up in that chaos, because I lived that chaos, I can help other people. I can
Right.
sit in the dark with them as a direct result of that. You know, um, it really started the day I was born. My dad brought a dozen long stem red roses to the hospital and told my mom, "These are for my daughter, not for you." And so it started this like jealousy with
Yeah.
my mom and me. And my mom pretty much beat me every single day growing up for whatever reason. My brother and I were always in trouble with her. But, the crap rolls downhill. My dad was beating on my mom and my mom was beating on us. And like we lived in this crazy environment where like really nobody else was out there. We were very sheltered. We didn't have electricity or running water. So we didn't have television and the things that other people have. And I think that trauma leads the parade. I do. I think that although I'm genetically predisposed to be an alcoholic and an addict, I don't know that I would have picked up that first drink if I didn't grow up like that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I wouldn't, because I see people with very normal childhoods that pick up that stuff too. And, it doesn't always have to look crazy like somebody getting beat with a 2x4 to have trauma, because everybody deals with trauma in different ways. And so what I might deem traumatic, other people might not, and vice versa. But I do believe that trauma leads the parade for most of us, and it bubbles up inside of us and gets us to take that next drink or that next drug because we don't have the ability to deal with that stuff when it pops up. And yes, I did I my dad died at 14. I got pregnant and married at 15, had a baby at 16, got divorced at 17, started drinking at 18, got arrested at 19, got arrested at 20, got arrested at 21, went into rehab.
So you were, I mean, it's interesting though how, once that switch gets flipped, it's if it's in us genetically and then behaviorally, and it's just that perfect storm. And once the switch is flipped, sometimes it's like it's off to the races. And I think, um, you know, I'm sorry that you went through all those things, but I know that you're putting it to good use to help others. And I know that personally for me, when things are too peaceful and too good for too long, I get real uncomfortable and still. And I know that that's because that was normal to me. And you almost feel bored when some crazy shit isn't going down. And that's not healthy and that's not normal. And it took me a long time to understand that. But also, looking around my environment, whether it was working too much or religion, using religion as an addiction, as an escape, as an identity, as a way to not deal with my, people's stuff, um, drinking, spending, just all the different things, that those were the patterns in my family that were modeled. We didn't talk about feelings. We didn't apologize. We didn't, you just, um, and I would not admit or call things trauma because in my mind, it was like soldiers and cops or getting, somebody jumping out of the bushes and raping you, or it had to be those kinds of things, not these little daily things where you hide under your bed in your bedroom because you're terrified or you feel like you have to protect your brothers. Or it took me a long time to be nice enough to myself to say that was a lot to go through, and that kind of thing. And we were taught not to be a victim, not to complain, just be tough and keep it moving type of deal. Um,
Right.
and so,
Same for me. I was taught we never air our dirty laundry in public.
nope.
And so a lot of that trauma I can relate to. A lot of that trauma I didn't recognize it as trauma. I literally had to be told by Janice Gaunt of the Shame Game, like, if on a scale from 1 to 10, what would you think your trauma is? And I was like, maybe a 5. And she's like, no, over a 10.
Isn't that crazy though, how our own trauma we minimize, but for other people, we feel so much empathy or we feel so much pain for other people. We look at something they went through and go, oh my God, how did you get through that? But for me, I'm like, oh, I'm fine. That wasn't a big deal. It's fine, and it took a long time for me to, and it's the therapy thing or the whatever, where you've got to go back and sit with your 7-year-old self and hug her and nurture her and protect her and tell her she didn't deserve that and all this stuff that I would find so hokey because I'm like, I am too tough for that kind of shit. I'm not going to do it. I won't do that. But eventually, I got tender toward myself. I started feeling more tender toward myself and wanting to understand all that. And it's just, But yeah, even you're like a 5, and they're like, no, it's probably like a 14 or a 20.
Yeah, it's off the scale.
So, was therapy or medication or all of the above part of your story? Did it help you? Because sometimes in the recovery communities, there are certain groups who don't like to talk about stuff like that. And there are other groups who very much encourage it. Like there are P11 groups for people who are on medication for mental health and other things where that has to be normalized to keep people safe. Because, and I'm a proponent of, you know, religion is not, Jesus is not going to fix you. The steps alone are not going to fix you. Like you've got to, there's a bunch of other shit going on and we've all got to deal with it in our own way because we've had very unique experiences. That's how I feel. But other people, oh, well, if you're on medication, you're not really sober, you're not really in recovery and all that kind of stuff. So I'm curious what your experience was with medication and or therapy and how that played a role in your healing.
So at 3 years sober, I stopped really doing meetings, and I figured I had gone to meetings and did recovery as long as I drank and drugged, that I didn't really need that anymore. And I ended up very depressed. And that was the first time that I went to the doctor and got on antidepressants. And really, it didn't help me much. I still was in bed every single day. I would take the kids to school, come home, get in bed, cover up and just not want to live. I really spent a lot of my early sobriety not wanting to live. And so here the buffer was out. Like I wasn't drinking, I wasn't using, and I didn't have that place to numb. But I
Right.
thought about killing myself on a regular basis. And I started going back to meetings, and I had never really completed the 12 steps. I did enough to get by. One of
Yeah.
my friends says, don't settle for relief, go all the way to recovery. And I never went all the way to recovery because I didn't think I deserved it. Like
Yeah.
everybody else could get it, but I knew I couldn't get it. And a lot of it was that trauma. I had been sexually abused in church by my youth leader. I had been sexually abused by a priest. Like there was nowhere to turn. And every time that people were talking about God, I was like, God was never there for me. He never protected me growing up. He never protected me from these men. Like I had a V on my forehead. My dad's drinking buddies were sexually abusing me, like everybody. And I just couldn't even deal with it. And then I had these little children at home, these little girls that I was watching grow up and thinking about me as a little child not being protected and not feeling like I was doing a good job. The medication wasn't working for me in many areas. Like I had no sex drive. Like it just wasn't helping. So I went back. I did the steps. And even after that, I was still like in this place where I didn't want to live. My life from the outside looked so beautiful, literally looked great. I had this big, beautiful house and this husband that was a great provider, and these little girls that looked up to me like I was the best thing on the planet. And I just didn't even want to be here. And I was talking to another professional one day, and she said, Amy, have you thought about doing trauma treatment? And I was like, like I'm sober 14 years. I don't need trauma treatment. I'll just go to more meetings.
Yeah. 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 Yep.
And an availability came open for a professionals week. It's called a professionals week, but it's really a trauma intensive where you go and learn like every single modality. And the way you learn it is that you go through it.
Ugh.
I was literally up for a week with like night terrors. And the night terrors had started coming back before I went into that one week inpatient. But I was like waking up in a cold sweat. I was remembering like a man with a knife at my throat, on top of me. And I was like, oh my God, like I am going nuts. I'm going crazy. And I was talking to an army vet, and he said, if that stuff is coming back, it really happened. Like your brain protected you from that so that when you couldn't deal with it. And now that it's coming up, your brain is healthy enough for you to start dealing with that stuff. And so when I went into trauma treatment, when I got out, I called my sponsor and I was like, how many people do you think I was sexually abused by? And she said 3. And I said, no, 8. Like I had blamed myself for all the other ones. It's not that I forgot about it or anything. I had blamed myself for being
Right.
drunk, for putting myself in that situation. So I went and did that. And then when I came back, I started doing rapid resolution trauma therapy. And that woman absolutely saved my life. She put me in a place where I was able to be a whole person. Like, put that stuff in the memory bank where it goes. she didn't get rid of it.
Right.
Hey, I know about that stuff and I can deal with it. Before, if I heard anybody's like story and it got real deep like mine, real dark, I would just start crying and not know why. Like what in the world is going on with me? Like I'm just breaking down at every second. And today I don't do that. Like I can sit with somebody in the darkness and I can empathize with them, but I can also just be a listener and encourage them to go get the work that they need to do. And the people that I help and the people that I sponsor, I encourage them to go get trauma treatment too. And it
And
makes
you
a huge
can,
difference.
yeah, and you can be there with them without yourself having to re-experience and relive your own trauma, right? So because now you've put it where it goes. And I think, and in society too, it's the way that it is designed where, especially, I know sexual assault and abuse happens to men too, but it's usually we just assume it's our fault, right? What were you wearing? How much did you have to drink? Where were you? Why were you hanging out with those people? And you just tell yourself it's easier to accept responsibility. And if you do bring it up, then maybe you get smeared in the community or blamed by the cops or whatever it is. It's just not even worth all of that. And so you're like, okay, I'll take responsibility. It's no big deal. And when when you were talking about what the veteran told you and like how your experience was, and I have used this analogy a lot too when I'm talking to sponsees or just different people about, I thought I would just start getting better when I stopped drinking and using and all that. And what happened was I actually got worse um, for a while. And I didn't expect that. And that's not what I wanted, obviously. I just thought if I stopped that, I would be healed magically and I would function like a normal person and like, whatever. And I even did AA alcoholically because I needed a replacement, but I wasn't actually dealing with some of this very specific traumas. I had to go seek out very specific groups and counseling for very specific traumas, because to your point, that is, and this mosaic started to fly together. All these jagged pieces of memories that my brain had protected me from. And as I got healthier and my mind and my body healed and I was getting sleep and nutrition and getting, unfortunately and fortunately, it all started coming back. And then I had no anesthesia and I was like, shit, what am I supposed to do with all this? Right. And so I felt like a constant walking breakdown. like, and I remember my sponsor called it an emotional sunburn, because that's what it felt like. I just felt like everything was just tender and exposed. And, um, but I remember her also telling me, this is where the healing is happening though, because you're allowing it to come through now. You're not drinking at it, you're not using at it, you're not pushing it away. You're allowing your psyche to process all that stuff. And at the time, I thought it was going to kill me. But in retrospect, but you need professional help when you're going through that, is the point. You
Yeah.
need support. It can be very dangerous for people. So, what is the rapid response? What did you call it? Um,
Rapid resolution trauma therapy. It's
rapid resolution.
RRT.
Okay.
It's absolutely amazing. It's actually a trauma treatment that they designed for people, especially women that were being sexually mutilated and killing themselves before the EMDR or brain spotting or some of those other trauma
Yep.
therapies work. And it really is a highly meditative, subconscious, like almost like a meditation that she does with you, where you don't have to relive every one of those traumas. You don't have to tell the details of it. And then she makes sure that she's in your subconscious and moves it to the memory bank where it goes. So I
Right.
kind of like the visual of Inside Out with all the different, like
Yeah.
colors and memories and like putting them where they're supposed to go.
Right.
So instead of getting stuck in your prefrontal cortex where you're reliving it with smells and thoughts and all of those other things pop up and you're in fight or flight because of that memory, that it's in the memory bank where it belongs and your body no longer responds to it in a reactive way.
What's crazy though is when that's happening physiologically, like you said, you don't know why. And that's what's so confusing is you're having all these reactions and you're not. able to connect the dots. And it's because it got stuck. It never got pushed through to the memory bank or the thing or whatever. It's just circulating there. And you're not consciously aware of it because your brain removed it to protect you, but physiologically your body still knows and responds to certain stimuli around you. And so it's like, it's a complete mind fuck because you don't. I remember going through that and just going into shakes and sweats and crying and having to go to the bathroom at work and trying to figure out what is going on. And it was just some smell or some song or the way some guy did something or whatever. And it took a long time. So, I mean, this is huge. I mean, it's huge because how shitty was it for you to sit there and like be sober and trying to, make all these big changes in your life, and still not really wanting to be here?
Yeah.
And had you never addressed those things, who knows what would have happened. So that's awesome.
You'd have a different speaker today.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to the question that you posed earlier that I didn't really answer about medications, I'm a proponent of people going and getting the help that they need. So whether that
Whatever that
means
is.
on medications or not on medications, I think that I've seen a lot of people that really do need medications. But what I tell the people that I sponsor is make sure that you're going and checking with your doctor on a regular basis, that you're on the right medication, that you're not just on it for 12 years because it's been 12 years, that
Right.
you're an advocate for your own mental health. You're an advocate for your own body, that you're doing the best possible thing for yourself, not just going out there and getting another medication and another medication. But there are a lot of medications that can affect our sobriety. There are a lot of mind altering and mood altering chemicals that there is something better for, like anxiety meds. There are a lot of people that are going and getting on anxiety meds and relapsing and not really understanding why, when there are lots of other things that we can do for our anxiety. I'm an anxious person and I do a lot of other things to get over that anxiety.
Yeah.
Meditation, prayer, yoga, like all of these things that I have to do in order to keep myself in homeostasis. And
Yeah.
I would love that quick fix. Don't we all want, instant gratification? Let me take a Xanax. That'll be great.
I was about
You
to say, I make the joke all the time. I used to be able to pop a Xanax and have a Dos Equis, and now I have to do like 17 fucking things every single day just to stay like at baseline. And it's a lot of work, but also it doesn't have the consequences. And I'm healing, but I had to learn what worked for me. And I did. I tried all these other, like, not habit forming, obviously not benzodiazepines, but other things. And nothing ever, because some of it was kind of just making me numb. I just felt sort of, and I needed to feel the highs and the lows. I needed to learn how to regulate my emotions. It's what I couldn't do. It's why I drank and used, because I did not know how to do that. Um, and but I have friends and people I know in recovery too who were absolutely suicidal 24/7, and they needed to stabilize to where they could go do the work and figure out all the things. And so um, yeah, it's a lot more work, to do it, the right way. But it's exercise, it's meditation, it's writing, it's talking to other people in recovery. And it's also for me just that understanding that, um, it's it's not like the end of the world. I don't know. I always just had this gloom and doom feeling about stuff. And now I've just realized like it will pass. Like, yes, I'm going to have to do some stuff to work through it. Can't just sit here and wait for it to pass on its own. Sometimes I need to go look at that. Um, but basically, watching other people do it is what has taught me when I'm in, like when my pop passed away a couple years ago. It's probably the biggest loss I've had in recovery. And he was really young and strong, and then he had cancer, and then he was gone. And watching the hospice and the needles and the things and all the stuff. And so when he passed away, it brought up all my childhood stuff that I thought I had dealt with. It brought up so much shit. But I couldn't sleep because I kept seeing all those images, and I went and got Reiki. I went and did different things that I knew would help me remove that energy that was stuck. And why, as miserable as it was during that time, I also felt so proud of myself because I knew I was doing the actual healing stuff of letting my body and my mind have those nightmares, keep me up, um, crying all the time, like all the normal human stuff that I had never done before. Because anytime I felt that way before, I just took something because I didn't want to deal with it. And um, it's really weird how I was like, wow, it's way harder right now than it would be to just go do some Xanax or Coke or get really drunk or whatever. But at least I'm dealing with it, which means it's going to go away at some point.
Right.
Whereas if I had picked up, then is that what makes stuff get stuck? Is that we don't deal with it? If we use chemicals instead, we aren't dealing, and so it just gets suspended. Is that what happens?
Well, kind of. And
Yeah.
you keep on piling stuff up on top of stuff, and we're in this perpetual pain adverse instant gratification cycle.
Yep.
And so if we don't go through that, it never gets shorter and shorter and shorter. So just like you said, when we feel those feelings, then the next time that we have to feel those feelings, we don't have to feel them as long and they're not as painful. And the distance between that pain gets shorter and shorter and shorter because we are using those tools that we have.
Right.
So the best thing about being sober is we get to feel everything. And the worst thing about being sober is we get to feel everything. And I love the process, and just to what you said too, like I know that when I'm feeling that stuff, those normal things that other people feel, that I'm actually getting healthier, that I'm actually like building up that muscle inside of me. And I know what I can do to regulate myself. I know what tools to pick up. It's whether I'm really willing to do all the work to go to happiness instead
Yeah.
of instant gratification.
Right. Or like even what you said earlier that your friend told you, like, don't settle for relief, go all the way through for recovery or whatever. And it's like, my instinct is always to reach for that instant relief. Of course, that's just instinct, but I know where that goes, right? And so I also see it now as part of my daily gratitude practice and stuff is thanking my body for all of the hard work that she does every single day, and like my, home and just all the things, all those types of things. But one of the things when I'm going through a hard time and feeling like I'm going to feel shitty forever, is being proud of myself or respecting myself enough to let my body and my mind go through what it deserves and what it needs to go through. Because used to, it was just like, shh, don't have time for that. Don't have time to cry. Don't have time for weird feelings. Take something, move on with your life. Don't be a pussy. Sorry for my bad language, but that's how we were raised, is just like, just deal with it. And now I'm like, I feel so proud that we can respect ourselves and what our bodies and minds need. It's very nurturing. It feels very nurturing, to allow, like if you had a child or a pet that was going through some type of injury, wouldn't you just be nurturing for the pain that it needed to experience to be able to heal? And I wasn't able to do that for myself. And so hearing you talk about the darkness that you had to visit and sit with, and I think that's another hard part too, for me anyway, is that I don't know how long it's going to last. And I just really like, okay, are we talking like 3 months, 20 days? Can someone tell me when it's going to be over? And that's not the nature of grief or trauma or whatever. Like it's just,
Or life.
or life.
Or
Yeah.
life. Really, this is a one day at a time, all the time. Like I have to live in today because here, right now, in this moment, everything is okay. I
Right.
can borrow as much guilt and shame and remorse from the past and bring that pain in today, or as much fear and anxiety and bring that pain into today as I want to. But if I'm living right here in this moment, everything is okay. And then I don't have to predict how long that pain is going to last. I
Right.
can just be right where my feet are.
And it's that fear. It's that fear of having to endure the pain that makes me want to know when it's going to be over, because I'm so afraid that it's going to take me out or do whatever. I don't know. It's all this. And this guy that I used to date always used to say, "Don't borrow trouble." And basically, that's what it was. Is like, don't borrow trouble from tomorrow. Like, we don't know what's coming. We never know what's coming, of course. But like, um, I still have that tendency sometimes to look for the bad things that could happen, right? And that's just an old pattern because I was protecting myself as a child. So I was always waiting and trying to see what's the next bad thing that's going to happen so I can protect myself and my brothers. And, you know, I guess it helped us to survive at that time through a lot of things, but it also became a habit that I would rather, not have. What has been the best part of this change for you in your life right now? I'm sure it changes, but
Oh
what is it
gosh.
right now?
The best part, I think the best part is just getting to live every day, like being right where my feet are, being comfortable in my own skin, having a quiet mind, you know? Yes, there are times that I crave that chaos, and I get plenty of the chaos dealing with other people's families that are in
Yeah,
addiction, which
I
I
can't
think
imagine.
fuels that, like fuels that thing that I need, like being able to navigate those chaotic times for them, being able to jump in the middle of that crisis and figure everything out and get the person into treatment and, help the family. I think that those are so exciting for me on that level, but also getting to be okay. Getting to spend time with my grandbabies. Like I
Mm,
twin grandsons that are 4 years old and a
oh,
granddaughter that's a year and a half. And I never thought I was going to be a grandma. I didn't think I would live past 30.
yeah,
And, just getting to be part of my family, watching the rest of my family get into recovery. Like, whew, you know, getting to be a whole person, getting
yeah,
to be the woman that God wants me to be. And, really looking at what does that mean to me? Uncovering those old belief systems, trading that stuff in for something new that really works for me
yes,
is like the greatest joy that I could ever have. Just really being okay with me, loving me first, being my own best friend first, not having those horrendous thoughts that I used to about myself and how worthless I was. Today, like encouraging myself and yes, you did it, like yes, you killed it today. And every day just being a better version of myself and being able to be that light for other people. And, like last night, I met a couple of young people in a meeting, and they just came up to me and they're like, "Oh my God, you're so inspirational." Since I got sober at 22, a lot of people don't think
yes,
that they can make it when
yeah,
they're young. And I know so many young people that are doing this thing, that are staying sober, that are, it's just amazing to me. So I love, 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 love my life today.
that is amazing. I love that so much. And I love how people get emotional when they are asked that question or they talk about it, because there's this moment of like, I mean, it's gonna make me emotional right now, but like, holy shit, I'm alive,
Yeah.
And I know for most of us, there were many times where we didn't think we were gonna probably live very long. And so just to have woken up today, first and foremost, but then everything that you're talking about, and um, well, on the flip side of that question, I guess, what's the hardest part of this type of lifestyle for you, if there is one?
Mm, I think the hardest part for me sometimes is like what we talked about earlier, having to do 17 things, having to constantly do more. Like sometimes I literally will be like, oh my God, I have to do more, not less. With 28 years sober, I have to do more for my recovery today, not less, because I'm further away from that last drink and that
Yep.
last drug. Like my forgetter is real. And so I have to constantly be doing the self-appraisal. I have to constantly be working with somebody that knows me well enough to check me, somebody that I respect enough, which my circle is pretty small. I don't have a
Yeah.
lot of people. Not everybody knows like everything that's going on inside of me. So I have to have those people that know me well enough to check me because I can still get myself into trouble. I can still do all of that chaotic stuff that I was doing before in the midst of my addiction because I might just want to pull the rug out from under it. So those are the hardest things today is to, not let myself slide on the things that I know I need to do because I just need a break. Like I
Yeah.
just don't want to do all of this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And, sometimes I get angry about that. Sometimes I get angry that I'm writing about the same old belief again and again and again and again and again. And my sponsor says, Amy, you're at the root. Like, this is the root stuff. It's going to be harder to dig this stuff out.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like we have to drill before we can fill, drill all of the poison out.
It's
And
so,
it's
because
so,
it never ends really. And I remember my sponsor saying, I'm going to hold the flashlight and you're going to dig. And I had no idea that I'd still be digging and will be digging for the rest of my life. But the scary part for me, but also the cool part, and it's evolving, is that the longer I'm sober, and people say like the road gets narrower or whatever, because you just know more. And I understand my patterns, and I know when I'm ignoring something that needs to be looked at. And I have to have people, like you're saying, I have to have people in my life that are like, I call bullshit on that. We need to talk about this, and um, I've been away from the pain of what my addiction caused for so long that you can easily just forget how bad it was. I was so stressed out with work a few months ago that I remember thinking, like, I wonder if I would still abuse Adderall the way I used to. Like, I wonder if I could use it responsibly now. Like, are you fucking kidding me? But this is a thought that literally, and had I not checked in or said that in a meeting or talked to somebody about it, I would have made an appointment probably. I mean, who even knows? Or at the dentist when they want to give you something before a thing. Like I have to, and because I think when you're in, for me, I've gotten comfortable, and I don't want to say I take my recovery for granted, but it's such a part of my life now that I don't know. It's not like early recovery where I was still terrified to relapse. I don't live like that anymore. So and I'm literally one decision away, one decision away from going right back there. And but it's crazy how your mind, this old timer in Houston where I got sober used to say, never forget if you're a real alcoholic that your mind has a contract out on your ass. And so it shouldn't surprise me when my brain still tries to kill me every now and then. But it's not because I want darkness or anything. It's because I feel restless. Um, and instead of having better boundaries at work and addressing the root cause of that stress and anxiety, I want to, oh, well, why don't you just take Adderall? You can get more stuff done. No, that's not the problem, is you don't have boundaries at work, right? And I didn't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with the repercussions of that. So and I mean, it's crazy how, like you're talking about, I can still create all kinds of chaos and self-destructive things without drugs and alcohol. So we need to hear that. I need to hear that every day.
yeah, when
How?
you were just talking, it brought up a memory for me. And I love that you said, if you're a real alcoholic, don't forget that, this has a contract out on your ass. It's so true. Last year, I had to go in and have some oral surgery. And I had to get an implant done. So I went into the dentist and he's like, "Are you in pain?" And I was like, am I in pain? And he said, I can prescribe you some pain medication. And I immediately said no, but my brain starts thinking about it. Like, am I in enough pain that I need pain medication?
Right.
I'm like, I'm going to schedule this surgery right away and then I can get pain medication. Like my brain is thinking of this. My subconscious is thinking of this.
Yep.
I'm like kind of looking forward to the pain medication after the oral surgery. Well, the oral surgeon doesn't give me pain medication. He just prescribes Tylenol and Advil. And I'm like a little mad, like inside of my head, like a little
Yeah.
mad about this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really? Like, whatever. And I remembered that I had some old, like, morphine in my drawer from when I had meningitis in like 2007. Because, of course, we don't throw away good drugs,
Hello.
we need them down the line. And I literally went up and got that morphine, put it in my hand. And I'm standing in my room with this bottle of morphine in my hand. And I'm going, I wonder how many I can take before I overdose. And I start Googling how many milligrams of morphine can you take before you overdose? And I am literally 27 years sober with a hand of morphine, thinking about taking them when I'm not even in pain. I'm literally not in pain. But my brain wants it so bad.
Yeah.
And that day, a woman, I had told my story on some Zoom meeting. A woman from England called me and said, Hey, Amy, I took your number down when you spoke a few years ago and saved you in my phone as Amy Angel. And I am struggling taking pills and I just can't stop. And I'm like, what? Like, what in the world? Like, that woman saved my life that day. And, like, this disease is cunning, baffling, powerful. It's always waiting to come in through the back door. It wants me dead, but it'll settle for me being alone and miserable. And so, even more I have to do for my
Yeah.
sobriety because I forget. I forget.
Well, and I think that's why those moments happen to remind us. And it's so scary to me because when you're that close to making the decision and you can wiggle out of it, thank God, like you realize how close you were to absolute destruction or death or relapse or whatever that was going to turn into. And, the insidiousness of it, how it just waits and it waits and waits and just the tiniest little opening. And, I think it's so crazy to me because I love my life. There's nothing about my life I want to change. There's nothing I'm trying to escape from anymore. It doesn't even make sense, but it's still in there. And that is what is so scary about it. And I think, if people try to stay in recovery alone, I'm sure plenty of people do it, but that accountability, let me bounce this off somebody else. Let me, and I had to have same dental type of stuff a couple years ago, and I remember calling my sponsor immediately and going, "Oh my God, what if they try to prescribe pain medication? Like, can you come over and give me like one every 6 hours?" Or like, I was freaking out because I can't be trusted. I know
Yeah.
myself. And if it says take one, I'm going to take four and we're going to see what happens and like, whatever. But I didn't want to like screw myself over by not giving myself pain medication if I genuinely needed it. And so that was the struggle. And so anyway, it's like you had to talk through this plan of like, do the Tylenol and Advil thing together. If that doesn't help, then they'll call in something else. And it ended up being fine. But yeah, I'm terrified of um, myself. And
Mhm.
so even the thought about, I wonder if I would still abuse Adderall the way I used to, like the fact that I was entertaining that conversation with myself, it's like, are you serious right now? Of course you would crush it up and like, come on.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so yeah, it's wild. So how has your relationship with yourself and your kids and like just your relationships, how have they changed in recovery?
Exponentially. My daughter, I lost my first daughter. I lost custody of her as a result of my drinking. And today she's in my life. She just got married and, a huge part of my life. We're friends. I don't know that I
Awesome.
really got to be a mom to that kiddo, but she's in my life and we're clear today. She got to go to a conference with me in Hawaii and she heard my story for the first time. And we
Wow.
both just bawled through the story. I don't even know how I made it through that hour. Like but she got to hear some of the things that she never knew before. And,
Yeah.
that there was a lot of healing that took place that day in our relationship. And my younger daughters, they've never had to see me drink or use. And my middle daughter, I was pregnant with her the last time that I drank. And, the grandbabies, they've never had to see me drink or use. My husband and I have been together for 27 years. I met him when I was almost a year sober.
Wow.
And, like, I never would have imagined in a million years that I would be the same guy for 27 years. I was like, oh, that's boring. I was like,
I can't imagine that for my life. I hope that happens someday, but yeah, that's crazy. But that's amazing.
yeah, I was like a 3-week person, like use them and lose them. Like,
Yeah, you've been around work 3 weeks is way too long. You need to get out of here. Lose my number.
yeah, exactly. So my relationships are amazing today. My grandma told me if you go to the grave with 5 true friends, you're doing good. And to foster those friendships. And today I do that. I have
Yeah.
hundreds of acquaintances,
Yeah.
but a very few select people that I choose to call friends, that I foster those relationships. They're important to me. I make sure that they know what's going on with me and I know what's going on with them. And my relationships with other people, I set them up for success. When
Yeah.
somebody asks me to sponsor them, which I sponsor a lot, I have 17 sponsees, that I set that relationship up for success. I tell them
Yeah.
what I expect from them, and I want them to tell me what they hope to get out of the relationship. And
Yeah.
so that we can start it off on a solid foundation and not just like blase faire, like we'll do whatever. That's not how I operate. I'm a very succinct person when I'm trying to get somebody to do the things that I know will be successful for them. I group sponsor, so I take people through the steps in a group. There's
That's
no way I
cool.
can sponsor 17 people all, like
I was
individually.
wondering, I was like, what the hell?
So right now we're on, steps, traditions, and concepts, and we have an accountability meeting where everybody checks in and lets me know what they're doing for their sobriety, and they're all over, like all over the world,
So
Hawaii,
cool.
one in London. So that gal that called me that day with the pill problem, I started sponsoring her, and yeah, it's just been amazing, like the life that I get, the relationships that I get as a direct result of having a healthy relationship with myself,
Yeah.
because I can't have a relationship with anybody else if the relationship with me is not right.
That's so beautiful. And I think, something that made me think of too was the relationships that I had with my parents and with other people in my life, how we get to forgive them. When you were talking about sharing your story and your daughter learning things about you, and I took personally some of my parents' stuff that I wasn't good enough or that they didn't love me or whatever. And then later in recovery, making amends and learning things about their experiences, it doesn't excuse the behavior, but it explained things. And I needed my daughter's forgiveness when I was making amends, and I refused to extend forgiveness toward my parents at that time. And I saw the hypocrisy and the conundrum I was in, and I had to make some serious changes about how I looked at my parents and understanding their pain, hearing their stories, asking them questions, because kids think parents are there just to be their parents. And it was the first time I realized, like, oh, these are entire people. They have wounding, they have stories, they have childhoods, they have all this shit that they never worked through. And it came out sideways on us, and my stuff came out sideways on my daughter. So it's like that forgiveness and that ability to forgive myself and understand people from a different perspective helps me sponsor better too. And I think, I really needed to let go of my resentments toward my parents and towards some of the abusers that were in my life. And that's really fucking hard to do because I'm not usually the forgiving type, especially of stuff like that. And maybe not forgiveness. Forgiveness is a strong word in those situations, but releasing the resentment at least to where I could be free. And and then helping other women do that too. through the steps and all that kind of thing. So I think
Yep.
that until I could forgive myself for my own mom guilt, I was not going to be able to look at forgiving my mom for stuff. And I'm still working on that. I'll probably be working on it forever, which I'm okay with. But um,
Yep. The
I
relationship with my mom today is amazing,
yeah,
like, and
isn't
I
that
never would
crazy?
I never would have thought that. But I do believe that to be true, that once I released my mom guilt, then I was able to release her and know that she did the best that she could. And that, I was hoping for her to be the mom that I thought I wanted or needed. And I don't need a mom anymore.
Right.
Like, I don't need her to be that for me. That there are a lot of other people that showed up in my life in that role that did a really good job.
Yeah.
My grandma showed up for me. She did a really good job of momming me when I didn't have the mom that I thought I needed.
Yeah. 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 Um, how do you get through to people when you're doing an intervention? Like you gave an example earlier, but when we are in our cups or in the throes, I mean, I personally was impossible to get through to. And the more you tried to talk to me about it, the more pissed off I got and stuff like that. So how do you how do you do it? You know,
Well,
like,
it's my superpower. It is
yeah,
my
you're
superpower.
a drunk whisperer. Like you have a gift that can get through what other people can't.
Right.
And so, yeah,
So I did an intervention last month on a gal that there were 12 people in her family. And, the sickness is within the whole family system.
yep,
Nobody gets to stay healthy in sickness. Everybody gets sick as a direct result of that addiction. And people develop some really sick survival skills, some really sick habits, some codependency, some, like lots of different things. And so, really being able to navigate that with the family first, getting them to see that stuff, getting them to have the buy in that they need to start their recovery first, and getting them all on the same page, knowing that, that there's like this puzzle out there of all these family members that know different things about the addict, and coming together all as a whole person, really as like this, cohesive team that can come together and put all of those secrets, all of that stuff that they've been holding on the table, so that now when we walk in and we're in front of this person that has an addiction, that they know that the gig is up. Like, there's no more manipulating every single person to do what you want, because you can't bullshit a bullshitter. And I know what you're doing. And they
yeah,
know that to be true. That they can no longer say, well, you don't understand, you don't know what's going on, because I understand and I know what's going on. So coming in and being able to have that conversation with them and saying, "Hey, I know exactly where you're at. I know exactly what's going on inside of you. And I know how afraid you are to make a change because this chaos is all that you've ever known. But I have walked through this. And this is what happened in my life, and I want to save you from having to go all the way from to the bottom."
yeah,
And this woman literally said no through 12 letters, and I told her my story, and she, even on the plane on the way to treatment, she was like, I would have never gone without you being there. Like, literally, your story was what it took for me to say yes. Like 3 days before Christmas, with her little kids, going into treatment and doing something different. And she's doing great, like she's about ready to get out and take the next steps. And she trusted me enough to say, yes, I'm going to treatment, I'm going to do sober living, I'm going to do IOP and all of the things that you're suggesting, because I believe that you know what I need to get better.
right. So you really do just meet them where they are. And I think that, um, well, I know that addiction is a disease of isolation, right? Like we are so freaking isolated, especially at the end. And so to let anyone in is like unthinkable. And it takes someone very special. And that is why recovery stuff worked for me, I guess, as opposed to rehab or jail or getting, lectured by all these people. I was like, fuck those people. But when I heard people's actual stories, and they were open enough to talk about these shameful things, these things that we're not supposed to talk about, you know, they had credibility with me and other people didn't, because how can you sit here and talk to me about something that you've never experienced? Like, how dare you? You don't know who I am. You don't know what I've been through, like that, blah, 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 whatever. And, and when you are used to manipulating your environment to protect your habit, right? And of course, your family becomes a part of that. Your coworkers, your whole life has to become a part of that web. Meaning you could lie and play people against each other and tell this person one thing. But if you get everybody in a room, like you're saying, and everybody knows all the shit now, and it's me and you, and we're going to talk about it. So I think that's huge. That's huge. And the fact that you're just willing to sit there and put your heart out there like that over and over and over to people to get them to, at least listen to what you have to say. Okay, I have a couple more questions because I know we're up on time, but two really. One is, how do you have fun now? Like, because when I got sober, I was just like, oh God, it's gonna be so boring. I can't even fucking deal with the thought of how bored I'm gonna be for the rest of my life. So,
Oh
what do
yeah.
you do for fun? Like,
Oh, I was like, yeah, the party is over. I have to be around these old people for the rest
yeah,
of my life, literally.
that's what I
I was
thought.
22. There weren't a
You were
lot of
so young.
there were not a lot of young people. It was like these old guys that were in their like 50s.
Chain
And now like
smoking.
these are my new best friends. Like, come on. Yuck. Oh man, I do so much for fun. I snowboard. I started a meeting probably, God, I don't even know how long ago now, probably 15 years ago. And we do a meeting every month on the full moon. We have a fire
Nice.
in the backyard. We have a potluck.
I love
The things that I thought were fun have definitely changed, hanging out with my grandbabies, playing cars with them, reading with them, laughing, dancing. Oh my God, my grandbabies love to dance. And so we listen to Clover the Girl and Blue October and all of these different songs, and we just dance, just like mad. And it's like, oh my God, I forgot how fun it is to just like have that little kid heart,
Yes.
and be able to just do that. The fun that I have today is sitting across somebody and having a cup of coffee and having that heart to heart, or listening to somebody's deepest, darkest, and being able to be that container for them, knowing that I'm a vault,
Yep.
that
Yep.
people trust me with, literally people trust me with their life, with
Their literal life.
their literal life. And just all this, like getting to do podcasts, speaking all over the world. I love to travel, so I travel a lot. I travel a lot for fun and for free. I travel a lot for my work. My husband and I do international traveling a lot. He likes to geocache, so I come along with him and do that. And we've geocached all over the world, and just like so many things that I get to do today
It's so
as a
cool.
result of being sober. Like I could
Yeah.
never do these things if I was not sober.
But I think too, like your perspective of fun changes, and there's so much innocence that's restored in this process, because a lot of us had fucked up childhoods, or maybe we became adults too early and we weren't ready for it, or whatever people's stories. And that sense of wonder and that childlike amazement of like just nature and things that, used to, I had to put a bunch of chemicals together to like have fun. And then you get back to this sense of innocence where, things that I didn't even notice when I was using now are just magical, like full moons and stars and streams and stuff like that.
Crystals.
So yeah, crystals. Yeah, I know. I charge my crystals under the full moon. My neighbors are like, are you okay? Stay away from me.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't fuck
A
with
little
me.
witchy. Yeah, I'm a little witchy.
Okay. So, final question. What is the best piece of advice that you would leave our listeners with when you're, a tool, like when you're in a moment? And for me, back in the day, it was the Serenity Prayer, just because that's what I was taught, and it was just, for whatever reason, it was that thing that would pop me out of whatever cycle I was about to climb into, and it for whatever reason woke me up. And go to a meeting, call your sponsor, do the thing, say the Serenity Prayer. What is a tool that you use and recommend to people when they're in one of those kind of triggering moments, to kind of get out of it, to recenter, whatever you want to call it?
I would say the best tool that I give probably on a daily basis to newcomers and people that have been around for a long time is to stay in the moment. Use all of your five senses. Literally, where are your feet? If you don't know where your feet are, take your shoes off and go out and stand in the grass. Get a piece of ice and hold on to that. Look at what's around you, smell what's around you, feel what's around you, or say the Serenity Prayer or PLTK. I often give that out: patience, love, tolerance, and kindness. PLTK, PLTK, PLTK. Because really, any word or phrase repeated over and over can clear a channel. It can get me out of that obsessive thinking
Yes.
quicker than anything else. Our regulator is with us all times. So learning to breathe, like learning to really breathe, like I teach my families that as well. Like, breathe. Take a deep breath. I want you to know that at any moment of the day you can regulate yourself, and teaching people how to regulate themselves can keep them in a place where they can be okay, no
Yeah.
matter how high the craziness is inside of their head, no matter the mental illness, no matter what. I mean, it can bring somebody out of a psychosis for them to just be able to ground in that moment and use all of their five senses.
That is great advice, and it's practical. That's why I always like to end on this question, because what is something practical? Like, no, tell me what to do, literally. And I remember being told to say the Serenity Prayer and repeat, because there is something about that mantra, that repeating, that can, and the breathing, the either the box breathing or 10 deep breaths or whatever, go sit still. And writing too is another one that I like to use as well, just because when I get really fired up about something and I'm really angry, we always talk about pause when agitated. And sometimes I just have my little notebook, and I'll write down what I want to say in that work meeting, like, look here, motherfucker, or whatever that I was about to say that would probably get me fired. And it just helps me to get it out of my system. I don't want it running around in my head. I don't want it inside my body. I am angry, and I am going to acknowledge that anger, but I'm going to do something with it that's not going to like burn down my job or whatever. Um, and then if that stuff, like why we do nightly inventories and stuff, if that stuff keeps coming up, there's something going on there that I need to take a deeper look at. And sometimes I'm just irritable that day and I didn't want to deal with somebody, right? And so um, I love these practical things that we can do, but I love where are your feet, and ice, and looking and smelling, and PLTK. I need to remember that. Um, okay, well, this has been fantastic. Your story is so inspiring and cool, and like you're cool and you're a badass and all this kind of thing, but then you get to now channel that into helping other people, and I just think it's magical. And Julie was right. She's like, you're absolutely going to love her, and I do.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this was really fun.
Thanks so much.